The most dangerous thing you can do in this world is to wake up while everyone else is sleepwalking. Not dangerous because you'll hurt others, but because you'll discover that the life you've been living is not your own. You'll realize that somewhere along the way, you traded your mythic birthright for a comfortable cage, your hero's journey for a predictable routine, your authentic self for a character everyone else expects you to play. This isn't about becoming antisocial or rejecting human connection. This isn't about declaring yourself superior to the masses or retreating into bitter isolation. This is about something far more profound and terrifying, discovering that you've been living someone else's story, following someone else's script, worshipping at someone else's altar of meaning, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Think about the last time you sat through a dinner party, nodding along to conversations that felt hollow, laughing at jokes that weren't funny, discussing careers and achievements and weekend plans that seemed to matter so much to everyone else, but felt like vapor to you. You looked around the room and wondered if you were the only one who noticed that everyone was performing, that behind their animated faces was a kind of desperate emptiness, a frantic adherence to roles that no one had ever questioned. In that moment, you glimpsed something Joseph Campbell understood deeply. Most people live their entire lives in what he called the ordinary world, never hearing the call to adventure that would awaken their true nature. The ordinary world is seductive because it's predictable. It's the world of mortgages and career ladders, of social media metrics and weekend routines. It's the world where success is measured by external validation, where happiness is something you pursue rather than something you embody, where the deepest questions of existence are postponed until someday when I have more time. It's a world of sleepwalkers who have forgotten they're capable of flight, but occasionally something stirs. Maybe it's a moment of inexplicable sadness while watching a sunset. Maybe it's the sudden recognition that you've been having the same conversation for years. Maybe it's the creeping suspicion that the life you've built, however impressive it looks from the outside, feels strangely empty from within. Campbell called this stirring the call to adventure, and he knew that most people, when they hear it, immediately look for ways to silence it. The call doesn't come with fanfare or clear instructions. It comes as restlessness, as a growing awareness that the masks everyone wears are just that, masks. It comes as the recognition that the games people play so seriously are arbitrary constructions, no more real than the rules of Monopoly. It whispers that there's another way to live, another way to be, but it requires leaving behind everything that feels safe and familiar. And here's where the real danger begins. Not in the journey itself, but in the recognition that everyone around you is invested in keeping you asleep. Your family wants you to be responsible. Your friends want you to be predictable. Society wants you to be productive. They don't mean harm. They genuinely believe they're protecting you from making a terrible mistake. But what they're actually protecting you from is the very adventure that could transform you from a character in someone else's story into the hero of your own. The mechanical quality of modern life isn't accidental. It's designed to keep you distracted, busy, constantly reacting to external demands rather than listening to the deeper currents of your own being. You wake up, check your phone, respond to emails, attend meetings, make small talk, consume entertainment, fall asleep, and repeat. Days blur into weeks, weeks into months, months into years, and somewhere in that blur, the voice calling you toward your authentic life grows fainter and fainter until it's nearly silent, but not completely silent, because you're here, reading these words, which means some part of you has heard the call. Some part of you recognizes that beneath the comfortable numbness of routine lies a wildness waiting to be reclaimed, a story waiting to be lived, a hero waiting to be born. Campbell understood that this recognition, this moment when you realize you've been living half asleep, is simultaneously the most dangerous and the most necessary moment in any human life. It's the moment when your real journey begins. The call to adventure never comes at a convenient time. It arrives when you're settled, when you've finally figured out how to play the game well enough to feel secure. It whispers its invitation precisely when listening would require abandoning everything you've worked to build. Campbell knew this timing isn't cruel coincidence. It's the universe's way of testing your readiness to trade comfort for authenticity, safety for truth. When the call first comes, it feels like madness. You begin to see the puppet strings that move everyone around you. Conversations feel scripted. Social gatherings feel like elaborate performances, where everyone has forgotten their acting. The news becomes background noise, a constant stream of manufactured urgency designed to keep you anxious and distracted. You start to suspect that most of what passes for important in your culture is actually elaborate avoidance of the only questions that truly matter. Who are you beneath all the roles you play? What are you here to do? What would you attempt if you weren't afraid? This is the threshold moment Campbell wrote about, the space between the known world and the unknown territory, where your real life waits. It's characterized not by dramatic external events, but by an internal shift so profound it changes how you see everything. Colors seem more vivid. Silence becomes pregnant with possibility. You notice birds singing songs you'd never heard before, even though they'd been singing them your entire life. You realize you've been living as a tourist in your own existence. The loneliness begins here, but it's not the loneliness of rejection. It's the loneliness of awakening. You can no longer pretend that surface conversations satisfy you. You can no longer invest your full energy in pursuits that feel meaningless. You can no longer laugh automatically at jokes designed to maintain comfortable illusions. This doesn't make you better than others. It makes you different from who you used to be. And that difference creates a space around you that few people know how to bridge. Campbell understood that this loneliness is actually a form of initiation. In traditional cultures, those called to become shamans, healers, or spiritual guides were often marked by periods of isolation, strange dreams, or the inability to function normally in everyday society. They weren't broken. They were being broken open. Their psychic structures were being dissolved so that something larger could emerge. In our culture, we've lost the wisdom to recognize these signs, so we often pathologize the very experiences that indicate spiritual awakening. The crossing of the threshold isn't a single moment, but a series of small deaths. You die to the need for constant approval. You die to the belief that security comes from external sources. You die to the assumption that everyone else knows something you don't about how to live. Each small death creates space for something more authentic to emerge, but the process feels like losing yourself rather than finding yourself. This is why most people, when they reach this threshold, turn back. The familiar prison feels safer than the unknown freedom, but some don't turn back. Some recognize that the discomfort of awakening is birth pain, not death throes. These are the ones Campbell called heroes, not because they're superior beings, but because they're willing to sacrifice who they think they should be for who they actually are. They understand that the goal isn't to become someone else's idea of successful or enlightened, but to become fully themselves, even if that self doesn't fit any category their culture provides. This is where the real adventure begins, not with external quests or dramatic departures, but with the decision to live from the inside out rather than the outside in, to trust your own perceptions even when they contradict popular opinion, to value your own experience even when it can't be easily explained or defended, to follow your curiosity even when it leads away from approved paths. If these words are stirring something in you, if you recognize yourself in this description of threshold crossing and awakening, then you're not alone in this vast mystery. There's an invisible community of fellow travelers, people who've heard the same call, crossed similar thresholds, learned to navigate by inner compass rather than external GPS. We may not gather in visible places or wear identifying marks, but we recognize each other by a certain quality of presence, a willingness to sit with uncertainty, a comfort with questions that don't have easy answers. Consider this your invitation to join that community, not by subscribing to any particular ideology, but by committing to your own authentic journey. Share your story in the comments below. Let others know they're not alone in hearing the call that most people spend their lives trying to silence. The trials that follow awakening are unlike the challenges you faced while sleepwalking through life. Those earlier difficulties, career setbacks, relationship problems, financial stress, were problems to be solved or endured. These new trials are initiations designed to strip away everything that isn't essentially you. Campbell called this phase the road of trials, and he understood that its purpose isn't punishment, but purification. The first trial is the discovery that most people don't want to be awakened. They want to be comforted, entertained, distracted, validated, anything but awakened. When you begin to speak from your authentic experience, when you stop pretending that shallow conversations satisfy you, when you refuse to participate in the collective trance of busyness and consumption, You become a mirror reflecting back to others the emptiness they're trying so hard to avoid. They don't thank you for this service. They often attack you for it. You learn to navigate family gatherings where everyone expects you to play your old role. You discover that friends who loved your company when you were asleep become uncomfortable with your presence now that you're awake. Colleagues who once valued your contributions start to see you as difficult, unrealistic, maybe even unstable. This isn't paranoia. It's the natural consequence of becoming authentic in a world that runs on pretense. The second trial is facing your own shadow, all the parts of yourself you've hidden, denied, or projected onto others. When you're sleepwalking, you can maintain the illusion that you're a good person who occasionally makes mistakes. When you wake up, you discover that you're a complex being capable of both great love and destructive selfishness, profound wisdom and ridiculous foolishness, genuine compassion and petty cruelty. This integration of shadow isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. You realize that your judgments of others were often projections of your own disowned qualities. The selfishness you criticized in your ex-partner exists in you too. The hypocrisy you saw in politicians lives in your own heart. The superficiality you mocked in social media influencers reflects your own hunger for validation. This recognition is humbling and liberating simultaneously. You stop needing others to be perfect because you've stopped pretending you are. The third trial is learning to trust your inner guidance, even when it makes no rational sense. The awakened life isn't lived according to strategic plans or conventional wisdom. It's lived in response to subtle promptings, inexplicable attractions, and what Campbell called following your bliss. This doesn't mean pursuing pleasure or avoiding responsibility. It means aligning your external choices with your internal truth, even when that truth is inconvenient, unprofitable, or misunderstood. You might find yourself drawn to creative projects that have no market value. You might feel called to have difficult conversations that everyone else wants to avoid. You might discover that your definition of success has nothing to do with what you were taught to pursue. Learning to trust these promptings requires developing new muscles, intuitive muscles that have atrophied in a culture that values only rational decision-making. But the trials aren't only about loss and difficulty. They also bring encounters with what Campbell called supernatural aid, moments of synchronicity, unexpected guidance, and connection with others who are also awake. These connections are rare and precious because they're based on authenticity rather than shared illusions. When you meet someone else who's crossed the threshold, there's an instant recognition, a knowing glance that says, "You see it too." These connections don't happen often, but when they do, they restore your faith in the possibility of genuine human relationship. You discover that you can love someone without trying to fix them, understand someone without agreeing with them, connect with someone without losing yourself. These relationships become laboratories for practicing the kind of presence that's only possible when you're not performing a role. The beauty of these authentic connections makes the loneliness of awakening worthwhile. You realize you'd rather have one genuine friendship than 100 superficial acquaintances. You'd rather have one meaningful conversation than endless pleasant chatter. You'd rather be truly seen by one person than admired by masses who don't know who you really are. This is the paradox of the awakened life. The more you become yourself, the fewer people understand you, but the ones who do understand you see you more clearly than you ever imagined possible. If you've felt this kind of recognition, this depth of connection that transcends personality and touches something eternal, then you know what I'm describing. Share this with someone who might need to hear it. Be the supernatural aid in someone else's hero's journey. Sometimes all it takes is one person saying, "I see you and you're not crazy." The return is the most misunderstood phase of Campbell's hero's journey. People imagine it as a triumphant homecoming where the hero is celebrated and their wisdom immediately recognized. In reality, the return is often the most challenging phase because you must learn to live authentically in a world that hasn't awakened alongside you. You can't go back to sleep, but you also can't abandon the world of sleepers. You must find a way to be fully yourself while remaining compassionate toward those who haven't yet heard their own call to adventure. The awakened person doesn't become a recluse or a preacher. They become something far more subversive. They become genuinely present. They show up fully to ordinary moments, bringing depth to surface interactions, finding meaning in mundane activities. They work jobs that may look conventional from the outside, but are infused with purpose from within. They have families, pay bills, navigate traffic, and deal with bureaucracy. But they do it all from a place of inner freedom rather than compulsive reactivity. This presence is quietly revolutionary because it demonstrates another way of being without requiring others to change. You stop trying to wake people up and simply live awake. You stop arguing with illusions and embody truth. You stop seeking validation for your insights and let your life be your teaching. This shift from evangelizing to embodying is the mark of maturity in the awakened life. Living between worlds requires developing what Campbell might have called noble duplicity, the ability to speak multiple languages depending on who needs to hear you. With fellow travelers, you can speak the language of depth, mystery, and transformation. With sleepers, you learn to translate your truth into terms they can receive without feeling threatened. You become fluent in both the language of awakening and the language of ordinary life, moving between them as circumstances require. The freedom that emerges from this integration isn't the freedom to do whatever you want. It's the freedom to be whoever you are. You discover that authenticity doesn't mean expressing every thought or feeling you have. It means aligning your actions with your deepest values, even when that alignment requires discipline, patience, or sacrifice. You realize that true freedom isn't the absence of constraints, but the presence of chosen constraints, limitations you accept in service of something larger than your ego's immediate desires. This freedom transforms even the most mundane activities. Washing dishes becomes a meditation on impermanence. Listening to a child's story becomes a practice in presence. Standing in line at the grocery store becomes an opportunity to see the beauty in ordinary faces, to practice patience, to remember that everyone is fighting battles you can't see. The awakened life isn't about having extraordinary experiences. It's about bringing extraordinary awareness to ordinary experiences. The solitude that once felt like loneliness transforms into something Campbell called the freedom to live, a deep comfort with your own company, an enjoyment of silence, an appreciation for the space between thoughts. You realize that you were never really alone because you were never really separate from the larger mystery of existence. The loneliness was actually homesickness, a longing to return to your true nature, which was always present beneath the layers of conditioning and performance. This doesn't mean you no longer enjoy human company or that relationships become unimportant. It means you relate to others from wholeness rather than neediness, from curiosity rather than expectation. You can love without clinging, support without controlling, connect without losing yourself. These mature forms of relationship are only possible when you've learned to be complete within yourself. The wisdom Campbell encoded in his understanding of the hero's journey isn't about becoming special or superior. It's about becoming human in the fullest sense, awake, authentic, present, and free. It's about recognizing that your life is a sacred story worth telling, that your consciousness is a unique perspective through which the universe comes to know itself, that your willingness to live truthfully is a gift to everyone whose path intersects with yours. The danger of seeing what others don't see isn't really danger at all. It's invitation. An invitation to stop living someone else's life and start living your own. An invitation to trade comfort for authenticity, security for adventure, approval for truth. Most people spend their entire lives avoiding this invitation, but you're not most people. You've heard the call. You've crossed the threshold. You've faced the trials. Now comes the most beautiful challenge of all. Learning to live fully awake in a dreaming world, finding your way home to yourself while never forgetting that home was always where you were.